Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 27th of October 2016, just after 1 o'clock, and welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Now, apparently somebody has been tweeting out that we are, quote, not pretty, but the news is good. So I think we're going to say we're a bit disappointed with... no, we're not. We're very happy with that. Thank you very much for the tweet. And the weather across most of UK is cold, chilly and grey. A few people are saying that the sun did peep through earlier this morning, but it's not too good. And it's apparently grey, cold and very windy in east central Scotland. So there we are.
Heating up a bit in the press. We mentioned this a couple of days ago, that the Press Regulation Panel, which is the regulator of the regulator, may or may not be giving recognition to Impress, which is the version of the regulator which is backed by the Media Standards Trust and the Hacked Off campaign. That recognition was given a couple of days ago. We didn't cover it yesterday, but it's never too late. Now, the point about this, Brian, is that this gives one regulator, puts them under the scope of the Royal Charter. And the other regulator, which is IPSO, which is the one which is supported by the mainstream media, it was refusing to allow itself to be placed under the Royal Charter. And the reason for that was because of Section 40 of the Leveson report, which basically says that if a newspaper or the person who makes the complaint against, say, a complaint of libel against the newspaper, refuses to take an option of arbitration, and that they then go to court on a libel
Excuse me.
charge, that even if the newspaper wins, if they're refusing to be regulated by the approved regulator, even if they win, they would be subject to all the court costs. And this, aside from issues of press control in this sort of business, from a constitutional, a legal point of view, this is unprecedented, and it says to me dictatorship.
Well, it's astonishing, Mike, isn't it, that somebody that goes to court and is found innocent simply gets costs slapped on them. So this means that justice, well, of course, is justice by how much you can pay. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that constitutional justice has been thrown out the window completely. And what's the objective? Well, the objective is what we originally exposed, and that was for central government to have direct control over the press and media. Why do they need it? Well, it's obvious that even with control, we can say corporate control over Britain's newspapers and the media. BBC is different, of course. But even with that control, stories are being printed which still damage and expose what the government is up to. So they had to clamp down.
So to put this in a bit of perspective, Impress, which is the Media Standards Trust-backed regulator, now recognised by the Press Regulation Panel, Impress currently has signed up to it a few small regional newspapers. They claim that those regional newspapers have a circulation of 2 million per month, but that's not a huge circulation at all. Whereas none of the large national newspapers want to be involved with Impress in any way, they joined up with IPSO, with the exception of, I think, the Guardian and the Financial Times and the Independent. They're not really doing anything at the moment. So Impress has no major media outlet linked to it whatsoever, but it now has government backing and the Royal Charter behind it, with the obligation then on mainstream major newspapers to sign up to that or risk this ridiculous situation of, if somebody takes a spurious libel case against them, that they end up paying that person's legal charges.
Yeah. So anybody could create one of these cases. And of course, anybody who has committed some form of sexual misdemeanor, particularly with children, is now in an even better place, because the moment anybody pointed a finger anywhere near them, they can go for the media.
Yeah. Okay, financial news. And it's all good, Brian.
Well,
it's all good.
That's good.
Yep. So here we go. Lloyds Bank. Well, the government has decided to sell off another load of Lloyds Bank. The government now claims to have recovered £17 billion of the £20 billion of government money that went into Lloyds following the financial crash in 2008. And the government now only owns 9% of Lloyds. So that's good news. So £17 billion recovered so far. What did Philip Hammond have to say? He said, selling our shares in Lloyds and making sure we get back all the cash taxpayers injected into it during the financial crisis is one of my top priorities as Chancellor.
Yeah, when he says we, he presumably doesn't mean the public. He means it'll come back into the government coffers, and as you've proven, they can't account for the money that comes in from the sale of public assets. So presumably, how can they account for this?
Well, they don't need to, because they claim that all the money is going to pay off the national debt. So that's good. This is all good. But unfortunately, Lloyds has been hit by another £1 billion they've set aside another £1 billion as a result of the payment protection insurance mis-selling scandal. So that brings the total amount of money that they've set aside to, strangely enough, £17 billion. So there you go. That's just a coincidence. And of course, Barclays also hit by this situation. And this comes because the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, has extended the deadline for PPI claims until June 2019. So Barclays having to set aside £600 million to pay off claims on this. But even better news, Brian, because Deutsche Bank is in profit.
Oh,
it's fantastic. It's absolutely amazing how this bank that's on absolutely bankrupt is
death's door.
Absolutely at death's door is in profit. So they have managed to claim a profit. I'm not quite sure how they've managed to do that. Net profit of 278 million euros.
It's called creative accounting, Mike. I think that's how you do it. It's a transformational process called creative accounting.
Absolutely, I think that's exactly what it is. 278 million euro profit. Now, of course, that's potentially has to be set against a $14 billion loss to the Department of Justice in the United States. That's still hanging over their heads. But nonetheless, and it's a lot better according to the Financial Times here. This is a class comment. I think the result was far better than the €6 billion loss Deutsche posted in the same quarter last year. So it makes up for that completely.
Yeah. And I'm reading that headline correctly, raises litigation provisions to 5.9 billion.
That's right.
You're running a business where you're so frightened that you've got things wrong. You put a mere 5.9 billion euros to one side.
Well, this is exactly what Lloyds and the rest are doing, because they've all got these kinds of scandals that's requiring compensation. Well, the other good news is that according to Bloomberg, because Deutsche Bank has been frantically looking for cash, they are considering suspending bonuses. That would be a shame. But the Bank of England has said that it wants information from all the large British banks on their current exposure to Deutsche Bank and also some of the Italian banks. And of course, exposure to Deutsche Bank means exposure in terms of derivatives contracts. So the Bank of England clearly still pretty concerned about the situation, whether or not Deutsche Bank tries to pretend that it's in profit this quarter.
Well, that's the Bank of England run by the Canadian who has our best interests at heart.
Yes. He's not worried about our interests in that case. Now, next, NATO. NATO defence ministers meeting happening at the moment. Well, it's really all about European ties, EU military ties. The UK is stepping up its package of measures to support allies in Europe. This is the news all over the media today, because we're going to send everything we've got against Russia. So we're going to push everything right up to the Russian borders, and we're doing that because Russia is pushing everything up against its own borders. And of course, those borders are too close to NATO's borders, and so we've got to push everything up against them. So Michael Fallon said that the UK is going to commit RAF Typhoon aircraft to the NATO Southern Air Policing mission, and that is in order to offer reassurance to the Black Sea allies. These are going to be deployed from RAF Coningsby, well, there we go. Lots of that sort of thing going on. What did he have to say about it? He said, backed by a rising defence budget This deployment of air, land and sea forces shows that we will continue to play a leading role in NATO, supporting the defence and security of our allies from the north to the south of the alliance. And then during the press, so he was giving a statement to the press, he said, we'll agree a wider role for NATO in the maritime security, helping to protect the Mediterranean. And this is one of the excuses, protecting the Mediterranean from those nasty migrants that we are driving out of sub-Saharan Africa and out of the Middle East.
That's created the EU naval anti-migration unit, anti-piracy. This is the EU Navy being formed.
Absolutely, and this is the key theme of this Defence Ministers' meeting. So he has announced closer ties, EU and NATO ties, along using this Mediterranean situation as the excuse. Jens Stoltenberg this morning giving a press conference, absolutely this was the message once again, taking practical steps to implement NATO and EU joint declaration from last July. He was crowing about Ms. Mogherini, who is the European Union, effectively European Union finance minister. He and she seem to get on particularly well. This is the agenda item for this meeting.
It's astonishing, isn't it? We've got to say that, of course, the forecast by David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives in this respect, that what we're actually watching is the rapid drive now for the formation of full EU forces. We can see it in front of our eyes, and of course, this is being done through NATO. So a bit of a smokescreen there at one stage, but now we can see it doesn't matter what NATO is doing. You see the formation of the EU forces, and what comes next, and what the Germans are talking about, is the formation of EU Treasury in order to support those forces. So this is rapid movement towards the EU superstate, while we've got Theresa May claiming to the British public that she's working hard on Brexit and an exit. So, Mike, I've got to say that your Brexit EU referendum PSYOP was spot on, that of course the whole thing was a scam.
And continues to be.
Well, let's just mention November the 19th, Winchester British Constitution Group Conference, reasserting the rule of law. Everything we see happening in the news around us at the moment tells us that we need this conference to talk about the fact that Britain in 2016, under the Conservative government, has become a lawless state. We've just heard how there is to be a charge for any form of law. So obviously proper justice under our proper constitution has just been pushed to one side. We are now a lawless state with a government that simply creates wars overseas when it feels like it. What can we do about it? Well, we have to recognise the problem, and we have to reassert the proper rule of law in this country. So if you're getting interested in what that Winchester conference is about, do come along. And if you buy your ticket via the internet, it is £10. The normal price will be £20 on the door. And tickets are now going quickly. So if you haven't got them, or you want some for friends, family, then you need to get online and get those tickets booked. Well, thank you for Faraway Lands. This landed on our doormat this morning. It's a letter of support and a donation from Greece. This is really excellent, where people overseas are tuning in to see what we're talking about. And well, we may not be pretty, Mike, but apparently the content is good enough for people to thank us and to send a donation. So we're going to say thank you very much to the person in Greece who sent that, and I assume the sun is shining there. Well, we pointed out that tomorrow there is a big rally in Westminster for this man, Sgt Alexander Blackman, Royal Marines. This man has been in prison now for some considerable time as a result of an unfortunate and unpleasant incident on the battlefield. He is in prison. Tony Blair, the man who helped create another one of Britain's unlawful overseas wars, is walking around a free man and a multimillionaire now. David Cameron is much the same. but it's taken the Royal Marine Green Berets to come together to put on another rally. This will be a very quiet, orderly event, but bringing together former serving Royal Marines to campaign for the release of Sgt Blackman. Now, I am sad, I think is the right word to say, that we've had to put out this tweet this morning because we had some really interesting information to say that the Conservatives have decided that they're effectively going to take over the Speaker's platform at this rally. So other speakers, we can't say who these people are, really to protect them in the circumstance, but we've had it on very good authority that the Conservative Party is now moving in to say, no, you let us put our MPs on the stage in order to speak out for Sergeant Sgt Blackman. So MPs from the very Conservative Party that worked to convict this man and hold him in prison. And what is he? He's a political prisoner, Mike. There's no other way of putting this. And now we have these callous, cynical Tory MPs wanting to move up front so that they get the publicity and spin that they are attempting to help this man in these appalling circumstances. So if you are ex-forces and listening to us today and you can get up to that London rally, I hope that you will attend. There'll be more reports on events in Westminster in due course. And we'll follow that by this from the Daily Telegraph. They are pushing what I regard as a very unpleasant little video clip, which is Rethinking Remembrance. Encourage you to go to the Telegraph website to have a look at this. So this is the British Legion poppy appeal, but it's now urging the public to, quote, rethink remembrance. And what is the message in this video? The message is that basically those that have served their country are mentally ill. You've got to see through the very emotive but rather dark meaning put forward in this film clip. But this is the basic message now, that if you're ex-forces, you are very, very likely to have mental illness or severe mental illness. And this has all got to be rethought through in what remembrance is about. So we thought we'd just have a little look at Rethink and mental illness. And this really led us onto a particularly interesting path. So here they are, Rethink Mental Illness. And it says our goal is a better life for everyone affected by mental illness. See how we make the difference. Well, we were interested that pretty quickly into the website, you see this, commissioning us, the leading voluntary national services provider. But if you get in touch with them, you can take them on to provide the services that you need. And of course, if we get deeper into this, we find what's actually happening is that Rethink is starting to provide NHS-type services. But of course, it's an independent charity. Well, if we dig in the website, we see this. This is some of their support groups across the country. So it's a very pervasive charity. But we could also say it's leading us to believe that we have mental illness problems amongst the greater proportion of the country. Now, in saying this, we recognise fully the many people that are in a bad situation as a result of mental illness, but we're focusing on what is really happening and what's being shown to the general public. So if we have a look at some of their financial information, we can see pretty quickly we're dealing with some big sums of money, 48 million. But if we have a look at priorities, their priority is a net growth in income from service contracts. This is business language to me, Mike. So this is a charity. It's doing it out of the goodness of its heart. But what is their future plan? Priority one, delivering a net growth in income from service contracts in accordance with their 2015-16 budget and financial plan. So let's move on. We've got some more detail here. And here's the income from service agreements. And my feeling is that we're looking at something which is quasi-charity, quasi-company, but of course everything's not for profit. But is this a sideways move of what should be primary care into the third sector? We could discuss that. So another one here, Trustee Strategic Report. And if we have a look at priority 2, increase our influence by positioning severe mental illness as a national issue. So here they are manoeuvring in order to get their name at the forefront by positioning severe mental illness as a national issue.
Whether it's warranted or not.
Whether it's warranted or not. And if perhaps any of our viewers and listeners at the moment are thinking, well, this is a little bit unfair, let's go even deeper. Here we are back on the site in April 2013. Major changes to the NHS were introduced, and this is new GP-led commissioning bodies. So here we see Rethink's interest in what's happening in the NHS and the fact that the contracts are being put outside of the NHS. Help us change the lives of people affected by mental illness by signing up. And then are the keywords come in here. This report was produced by Rethink Mental Illness in partnership with Lundbeck Limited. Lundbeck has provided financial support for the research, writing and rollout meetings. So who do we think that Lundbeck are? Well, bring in this company, and as we always say, please go online and check this yourself, because what we've got is a major and very powerful pharmaceutical drug company. So they're working with Rethink, and of course they specialize in psychotropic drugs, and they specialize in working a market to make profit from selling those drugs. But what a fascinating website it is, because they've got a lot of their history. This one here, 1915 to 2015, and they give us some extremely interesting information under Did You Know? So what do they say? Victims of the First World War provided neurologists with an unmatched, if unwanted, research opportunity by observing physical and psychological dysfunctions caused by war injuries. Neurologists were able to link subdepartments of our central nervous system with specific activities. In 1917, Julius Wagner, Ritter von Urag, described the first causal psychiatric treatment solution when he discovered the malaria inoculation treatment of paralytic dementia. In 1920, Otto Louis performed the first experiment proving that nerve transmission is a chemical process. In 1922, schizophrenic patients started to be treated with somnifen Dauerschleife therapy. Patients were given large doses of a barbiturate drug, making them sleep all day long for 2-3 weeks at a time.
This is nice.
This is very nice, Mike, and I think I'm going to put it in this context, because if we go back to the original British Legion video, after the old soldier, it moves on to this gentleman who says that tragically this gentleman is suffering from mental illness. But let's bring in future platforms. It says for this drug company, our research and development strategy will provide a future platform from which Lundbeck can discover and develop drugs with clearly documented effects on biologically defined patient groups. It is expected that society's demand for this new type of drugs will increase. Currently, Lundbeck reinvests approximately 20% of its revenue in research and development. So in a few steps, we jump from the British Legion rethinking what remembrance is about, and that leads us to teamwork with drug companies who profit out of selling more drugs back into the very arena that Rethink is operating in.
So the question is, did Rethink exist first? Was that created and then they went looking for partners, or in fact was Rethink created as a front for this drugs company?
Well, these are key questions, Mike. All we're saying really is that we get a deeply uneasy feeling when we see a charity moving in on a particularly vulnerable community in UK, which is people suffering from mental illness in the first place. But now a company which says, well, it was unfortunate there was all these victims of the First World War, but we were able to test our drug skills on them. And now they seem to be focusing on the next generation of victims from the created wars. So perhaps our viewers and listeners can help us by a bit of extra research on this, or indeed asking some questions. But it seems to me that the British Legion is also getting into some very dangerous ground. Are they fully aware, or are they unaware of what's actually happening? Well, let's follow on with the subject of health, because this is a headline from the Daily Mail. It says, test cholesterol in toddlers to stop 600 heart attacks a year. They've already apparently checked 10,000 children. Don't know whether mum and dad knew about that. But according to this article, scientists at Queen Mary University say that if we can screen children between the ages of 1 and 2, we can see the ones who are at risk of heart attacks in the future, and we can get them on drugs in their teens. So this is early prevention. And they say 250,000 people are affected in the UK, and they're 10 times more likely to have a heart attack by 40 than healthy people. So this is the next bit. The problem's easy to treat with statin pills or cholesterol busting injections. Let's think about that. The problem is easy to treat. Well, we've done the same thing. So we went having a little look at the university. We find links through to this research institute, William Harvey. Now, this lady simply happens to be on the website, so no particular connection with her. We're simply saying that when we go researching the university, we find some interesting things. Well, what do we find? Well, at the heart of the research, of course, we find the Wellcome Trust, and we're very quickly getting back into the same realms that the finance for the research is coming in and through the world of drug companies. NICE, as you mentioned, Mike, here we are. This was from UK column a couple of years ago, but it says thousands more could be offered statins. These were the wonder drug that were going to eradicate all of these terrible heart problems. And since we're sticking with the Mail, we had this. Statins, a cheap and effective way of avoiding 10,000 heart attacks and strokes a year. But notice it's a claim by a top academic. This is not proof. This is not evidence-based. This is a claim. This report's dated February 2014. Relax, statins are cheap and effective. But this was another report which I think many people paid attention. Dr. Malhotra, who said these things are dangerous, and this, quote, mass pill popping is folly. So his recommendation was that if you're on any form of cholesterol busting medicines, they could be doing more harm than good. But now we're going to test 1 to 2 year olds, Mike, with a view to getting those youngsters onto these drugs at young teenage years.
Earlier the better, Brian. Earlier
the better. Well, this was the Telegraph, and it says statins, the drug firm's gold mine. We're just going to say relax if you're the general public. These companies have got our best interests at heart. They say we'll pay for the research that says you need our drugs to be healthy, and it's not for profit. We do it out of the goodness of our hearts and for yours.
Of course they do.
Yep, so no problem at all. And we'll join the little segment of news together because, of course, if we look at what the British government has been doing for our children, everything is an attack on them. We've got the sexualisation of children in education. We've got the rapidly growing mainstream media peddling soft pornography or even hard pornography at children. We're going to get more sex education going. We've got protection for the internet porn makers. And then we've got Theresa May, former Home Secretary, now Prime Minister, of course, making sure no full investigation into those abusing children. So can we trust this government or any of the parties to protect the children, Mike?
No.
No. So get those drugs into your children as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And, modern slavery has been a subject of Amber Rudd's interest in recent weeks. She has now pledged £11 million to create a dedicated modern slavery innovation fund. So we're creating a modern slavery innovation fund. Brian, does that give you a warm feeling?
No, it doesn't.
So we're going to innovate on modern slavery. And this, she says, is set up to tackle the horrendous crime. I'm not quite sure what she means about that, whether that means more profit to be taken out of it. But she is apparently at the Santa Marta conference in the Vatican today to deliver a presentation on this with representatives from the Roman Catholic Church, of course, and also civil society organizations, because you've got to get the civil society organizations, the charities, the third sector in there. Otherwise, we couldn't solve these problems. So this fund is open to bidders. So you've got to bid for the money, which means, of course, the government decides which projects get the money. And they are encouraging organizations to come forward with innovative projects on innovating for modern slavery. There you go. This is then additionally, they're going to provide a further £3 million, also available to bidders, for a dedicated child trafficking protection fund. So that's a fund to protect child trafficking, is how I'm reading that.
The government's doing this with a vengeance, Mike. That's what the Child Sexual Abuse Inquiry is about. Of course, that's made huge progress. Same going on in Scotland. It's all good news because they're really tightening down on this stuff.
Absolutely. So Amber Rudd, as you can see there on screen, said modern slavery is a global crime which demands an international response. Only by working together can we fight against this barbaric crime which destroys the lives of the most vulnerable. Britain has taken world-leading action to tackle modern slavery. We are determined to work with other governments around the world to eradicate slavery and send a message that it will not be tolerated. This is exactly the same approach, of course, which is being taken with the drugs trade, which is so effective in Afghanistan, as we reported earlier in the week. Children and adults are being seen as commodities which are being herded across the world.
Herded, sold, trafficked, all used for pharmaceutical experiments.
Right, and in the meantime, of course, the Calais jungle continues to be torn down, and Save the Children Fund, another organisation which has not responded to the question of what will be done to protect children in this country, is complaining that children in Calais are sleeping rough. It's horrendous if they are. But the question still has to be asked, bearing in mind the amount of pressure which continues to be placed on this situation to bring these children to Britain. The question that still needs to be asked and answered by these organisations is what will prevent these children being trafficked in Britain once they come here. And the evidence is that this is what has been going on. There's no evidence from anyone that this is going to stop. So Save the Children saying, dozens of children were forced to sleep outside last night after being denied a safe place in Calais. The situation for children in Calais after the demolition is the worst it's ever been. And they're saying that they want these children brought to Britain. Well, got some questions to answer first on that issue.
It's difficult to know what to say. The hypocrisy and the lies just pour out now, and of course, in the meantime, we've got child abuse survivors who are locked up in prison as a result of Theresa May, Alison Saunders, head of the CPS. As far as we know, no proper charges. Lady doesn't even know why she's there, and we are the nation protecting children. This is a lie.
Absolutely. Now, from the moment almost that the referendum was announced, we said that what was likely to happen was that after the vote, we would have years and years of argument and discussion and never any progress made on, it didn't really matter which way the decision went in the vote itself. Liam Fox indeed suggesting exactly that. The UK must win a deal with the European Union by 2019 or face never-ending talks, according to The Independent. Well, you know, this is absolutely what was expected. This is what they're aiming for. They're delaying and delaying. So if he's saying the deal has to be done by 2019, the process begins in March 2017, they claim. Well, we'll see what happens in the end, but I think we know.
But isn't it remarkable that we got Liam Fox brought back into mainstream politics? This was the man who had to stand aside because he'd been taking his, let me get the phrase right, his partner secretary, his friend. He'd been taking him to official meetings where that person should have been security cleared and wasn't, masquerading as a security cleared person. So Liam Fox had to stand down. He's then just pushed to the sideline for a couple of years. And then when the heat's died down, he comes back into mainstream politics.
Absolutely.
Obviously a safe pair of hands in a political sense.
Yes. And of course, in the meantime, Brexit being used as a driver for so many things, not least trade. And some people on Twitter today saying that this comment from the boss of the World Trade Organization saying Brexit will not cause UK trade disruption is a U-turn, because of course leading up to the Brexit vote there were all kinds of scare stories about world trade and what would happen if people voted to come out of the European Union. So they're all accusing this man of doing a U-turn. This is Roberto Azevedo. Now, of course, he's not doing a U-turn because what has changed since then, that is that with the failure of TTIP, TPP, CETA and TISA, these massive trade deals between the EU and other nations and between the Pacific nations and so on, these deals have pretty much failed. But not to worry, because Brexit is being used as the driver for a whole new swathe of smaller trade deals that they're hoping are going to get past people because they're not quite so huge in terms of their scope. But nonetheless, these new trade deals are going to have exactly the same types of problems with them that the big deals have. Now, Theresa May is, as we've said before, her new hashtag is hashtag Global Britain. She wants everybody to think of Britain as being a global nation, not just an EU nation, a global nation. And she is driving the trade agenda, the free trade deal agenda right around the world at the moment. That's why this man is pretty comfortable about the situation that Britain is in at the moment. Because it is British policy that these trade deals go through and all the incumbent attachments that go with them.
Yeah, rules and regulations.
Absolutely.
Are plenty. Well, what a state the country is in. This is no accident, of course. We can track through the political agenda across all three parties that has built this up, particularly over the last 30 or 40 years. If we're going to do something about it, then of course the people behind this malicious agenda have got to be exposed. And the start of that process is to start talking about our Constitution, how the Constitution's been undermined. Mike has been pointing out now we're rapidly in the case where there is no justice at all, and certainly not if you don't have any money. What do? We've got to tell the truth. We've got to expose what's going on. And it's ultimately up to all of us in this country to help reassert the proper rule of law. Well, there we are. I'm told the sun broke through in Essex. I think that came through while we were in full flow of the news. So just for the population of Essex, we thought we would give you a mention. Thank you again for that letter from Greece. It was very kind of you. If anybody else is not yet a subscriber of UK Column, perhaps you consider taking out that subscription, because we are only here with your help and support. And that's certainly going to be the case in the future as we see the British government ramp up to take full control over the press and media in UK. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.